Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay, just making sure we're all awake here. So I'm Christian Burris, and I am from the Z. Smith Reynolds Library, and I would like to welcome all of you to today's library lecture. For the past 19 years, Wake Forest University and Winston-Salem State University have held a joint celebration on Martin Luther King Jr. Day that also recognizes the bond between the two institutions when students from both schools participated in sit-ins that began on February 8, 1960 at a segregated Woolworth's lunch counter in downtown Winston-Salem, 1 week after those protests began in Greensboro. On February 23rd, 10 white students from Wake Forest, 11 black students from Winston-Salem State, and Carl Matthews, a resident of Winston-Salem, were arrested for their nonviolent protests. The sit-ins continued, but Winston-Salem had the first successful resolution in North Carolina as the lunch counter was later desegregated on May 23, 1960. Each year, the Building the Dream Award has been awarded to students and faculty staff from both Wake Forest and Winston-Salem State, recognizing these individuals for their work as it contributes to the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for public service and action. If there are any past winners of the Building the Dream Award with us today, would you please stand to be recognized? Since 2011, the Z. Smith Reynolds Library has featured the immediate past student winner to present their lecture on their work. Today, we are fortunate to have the 2018 student winner of the Building the Dream Award, Jeni Mai. Jeni is a current student at Wake Forest University School of Divinity and was awarded the Building the Dream Award for their justice work in domestic violence and sexual assault, their homeless advocacy within the Winston-Salem community, and their racial justice work at Sunnyside Freedom Schools here in Winston-Salem. In this lecture, Jeni will discuss their formative journey as a Black, multiracial, queer, trans-non-binary person at Wake Forest University, and how that experience has empowered them to dream up radical healing spaces for the Black, brown, queer, disabled, poor, colonized, femme, indigenous, immigrant, and enslaved bodies that exist at their institution and within their communities. So, welcome, Jeni.
Hi, everyone. So I'm not going to stand in front of the podium because I'm really short, and I feel like if I'm right here, it just blocks off everything. So we're not going to do that because I don't believe in hierarchy. But before I begin, I would like to give special thanks to Fahim Glomley, who nominated me last year for the award. I would also like to give special thanks to Rose O'Brien, who is my freshman year roommate, who gave the speech last year. And I would also like to give thanks to Nehemiah Roll, who gave the speech a couple years beforehand and was one of the first mentors that I had here at Wake Forest University. So it's just ironic how different ancestors at Wake Forest kind of lead each other into the fold and help us progress into a speech such as this. I would also like to give a big congratulations to Kayla Heilig, who was Wake Forest University student recipient for the Building the Dream Award this year. So she's not here, but give her a round of applause. And I would like to honor Najee Ali Baker, who passed away last year from Winston-Salem State University at a barn party here at Wake Forest. We hope that his transition has been well and that God is keeping him right now. And last but not least, I would like to give a great big thanks to everyone sharing in this space with me as I embark on this journey of sharing and vulnerability. So before we get started, this is my lovely PowerPoint that I have with me today to help me guide through this presentation. The theme is from something I Googled, something like Google preset PowerPoint slides. So if y'all want a cool trick, that's what I have. Special thanks. So before we get started, I think it's just right that we get to know each other, specifically me, since I will be standing in front of you for about 30 to 40 minutes talking. And this is me. That's a picture of me in an aoyai, which is a traditional Vietnamese gown that people wear in Vietnamese culture. And I use they, them pronouns, by the way, which just means that if you're saying I'm eating pizza, you could say they are eating pizza over there versus she is eating pizza over there. I do use she pronouns, but that's only reserved for people that I'm really, 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 really intimate with. So if you're a random person, use they instead of she. Thank you. I use they, them pronouns. I am a current first-year graduate student at Wake Forest University's School of Divinity. I'm originally from Charlotte, North Carolina, 704. And for those of y'all who find this important, I was born on July 11th, 1996, which means that my sun sign is in Cancer, my rising sign is in Scorpio, and my moon sign is in Gemini. I am a double deacon, which means I went to Wake Forest University as an undergraduate with majors in sociology and women, gender, sexuality studies. I majored in those things because they were the most flexible majors that I found. And after a while of changing between 5 different majors, I was really tired, so I just settled. This is also me. Do I press the button or do I press the green one? Okay. There you go. Awesome. Thank you. This is also me. So this is a great big watercolor, beautiful, iridescent purple of other things that I am. I am a first-generation college student and a first-generation American, which just means that my family are immigrants from Vietnam. I am a descendant of an Amerasian, which means that my dad is the son of an African-American U.S. soldier who came to fight in Vietnam during the Vietnam War and got my Vietnamese Cambodian grandmother pregnant. I also identify as Black because of this African-American ancestry. And because I don't know my grandfather, I'm guessing I'm a descendant of enslaved populations here in the US. I identify as non-binary or transcendent, as I'd like to be called myself lately, or all of those other lovely things that you see up here. Non-binary, genderqueer, gender transcendent, gender fluid. It just means I don't fuck with the binary. It also means that whatever I'm feeling in that moment is my gender identity. I also identify as an ex-Catholic and do not identify with any religious traditions currently. At the Divinity School, I do identify as non-Christian though, just because within the context of a Divinity School, mostly everyone's Christian. There are a couple of Buddhists here and there and people who identify as non-denominational, but overall, I'm just like, I'm here, I'm present, I exist, that much I do know. And I also have anxiety, and I'm along the spectrum of manic depressive or bipolar disorder. I identify as a trauma healer and am a survivor of trauma myself in my life. And as a trauma healer, I want to deeply engage with the trauma of different marginalized communities and my own trauma. And finally, fun fact, the Lord up here underneath Asian refers to my dog, who's pointedly named after Audre Lorde. I think it's really cute, and she's the love of my life, besides my partner. So all these things are me, and believe it or not, this list is growing as well. And now if I thoroughly introduce myself, I would like to get to know who's in the room with me and just kind of why you're in the room. So why are some people in the room? You can just raise your hand and be like, I'm here because Jenny asked me to be here, which is fine and valid. Maria.
I'm here because you're my role model.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Kara.
I'm here because I think you're amazing and I think we all.
Oh, thank you. One more person. Someone who doesn't know me. Yes.
I'm here because I've been here just a couple of weeks longer than you've been alone. Here in June.
Nice.
Ever since we started having this lecture every year, I'm looking at this.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing and indulging with me. I also wanted to feel a little hyped up, and I do feel hyped, so that's good as well. So why I'm here, as the introduction has stated, I decided to share all of those things before as it relates to this lecture because all of those things that I shared before, from my birthday to my zodiac sign to the different traumas I've experienced in my life to what I'm passionate about, it's all led up to me receiving this award and what that award has meant for me. And at one point or another, all those aspects of my identity have contributed to why I received the award. So as you see up there is a picture of me looking cute in all black with a snapshot of my award from last year, as well as an article naming the reasons why I received the award last year as well. And like the majority of the things are true as to why I received it. So I did work in Sunnyside Freedom Schools this past year, which is an integrated reading curriculum program designed to help establish the reading gap between students of color and white students who don't get as much learning during the summer as their white counterparts do. I did lead a sexual assault and domestic violence trip to Asheville, North Carolina with these beautiful group of people up here, and we stayed in this beautiful hostel that I have stayed at by myself at one point or another, but that was for other troubling reasons. I have also led a trip to the March for Black Women in Washington, D.C. with a group of 20 students as well last year. I went to a service trip in Vietnam during my time here at Wake. I also went to South Africa and conducted a research project in Black consciousness and embodiment for women who identified as colored within the South African context. I led 2 trips to the Arizona border. I went to DC to represent a group of students who went there for the Anna Julia Cooper Center one year. I went to the Arizona border again. I've also done campus protesting activism during my 4 years at Wake since the very first day I got here at Wake when it was a ish show. I also led and was VP for a policy group known as Roosevelt, which is a think tank that Nehemiah role was at one point or another the president of. And I also was a moderator as well as a co-director and director for Branches, which is the social justice retreat that happens at Wake Forest University every year with about 60 to 70 students. And so when I received the award, after doing all these things my senior year, I cried. And I cried and I was bubbly, and it's because I'm a Cancer, but it's also because I'm emotional turmoil. But also, I just cried. And I cried, and it wasn't because I felt like I didn't deserve the award. And low-key, I didn't even pay that much attention to the award after I received it. What actually happened to the award after I received it was that I put it in the back seat of my car. And it has been there for an entire year until just last week when I detailed my car on the inside for the first time. So it had been collecting dust in the back of my car for an entire year after I received it, just the night afterwards. And so I cried, not because of, I was like, oh my God, I did all these things, and it's my senior year, and I've accumulated so much accomplishments, and I'm so great. I cried because after 4 years of Wake undergrad, I survived. I survived Wake. And what did I survive, you may ask? Well, I survived Wake Forest. And for those of you who know what it means to survive at Wake Forest, you know what it means to survive at Wake Forest. I survived White Forest. I survived the first few years of my adulthood life. I survived my first car crash. I survived my first heartbreak. I survived more trauma. I survived more abuse. I survived depression. I just survived a diagnosis of depression. I survived a diagnosis of not just depression, but manic depression. I woke up every morning and survived on this campus. And I cried that night I received that award because I am here and I survived. And I had to really contemplate, why I cried, and in receiving the award, I had to contemplate, why am I giving this lecture? Why am I standing here in front of y'all today? Why did I receive the award? Why is it important that I received the award and survived? And so when I finally pulled my shit together, like 5 minutes before I came over here, because that's when the lecture was finished, if I'm going to be transparent, I was like, all right, it's time to make this lecture. And I thought about, what I wanted to go over, what I did to receive the award, and I realized that the award wasn't significant to me because of the things that I did. The award was significant to me because I survived, and some people didn't survive. Some people didn't survive the work that they did, and they didn't survive, in fact, because they were taken away too early before their time, like Martin Luther King Jr. And as I've learned from my esteemed professor, Dr. Melva Sampson at the Divinity School at Wake Forest, an ancestor can be defined as an individual who has lived a life worth commemorating, someone who has transitioned into the next realm with highly esteemed characteristics worth looking up to. According to Afrocentric wisdom, the ancestors, although they have transitioned, are never dead, and they exist with us in the present and guide us in our own journeys into the future. Now, I am no Martin Luther King Jr., and I have not nearly accomplished what he did for this nation. I will, though. Not to the groundbreaking, revolutionary scale that he did, but if I do know something, was that in the process of creating this lecture and thinking about how I wanted to commemorate Dr. King, because the award I received was indeed created in commemoration of Dr. King, I know that we both received awards for the feats that we had accomplished within our given context, and yet no one truly knew the depths of trauma and pain that we had endured in order to receive the rewards that we received. I also knew that one of us survived and the other one didn't, and that stuck with me. As a preteen, not many people know that Dr. Martin Luther King committed or attempted to commit suicide twice. And at the end of his life, he was also severely depressed. He smoked many cartons of cigarettes every day. He had lots of fight with Coretta King. And at the end of his life, to some point, he was so depressed that his aides tried to convince him to receive psychiatric treatment for how depressed that he was, how much inner turmoil he had experienced in going through his work, writing his letters, going to jail, and eventually at some point his assassination. And I would like to think that towards the end of his life, before his assassination, he was already near death, if not a physical one, an emotional and psychological one. Erica Garner, daughter of the late Eric Garner, who was choked to death at the hands of New York police, died in late December of 2017 after being placed in a medically induced coma after an asthma episode precipitated a major heart attack, a fatal heart attack. To friends and families and people who admired her, she was a true social justice warrior, someone who fought the good fight with an unshakable sense of justice and passion for humanity. And in an interview earlier that December, she also said that she was struggling with the stress and everything that came with the work. And she poignantly pointed out that at some point the system beats you down to where you can't win, to the point where you have a fatal heart attack. What is the point of fighting for justice if we die before we get there? And this was the question that I had to confront for myself when I attended Wake Forest University as an undergrad. Today I heard something profound from my ethics professor today in class that I just had to add to my lecture, because it teases out something so succinctly true in the issues that I have with Wake Forest University as a current student and current alumni. It's a weird thing because I'm a student there and I'm alum now of undergrad, but I still go here. And the thing that my ethics professor said was, How can you talk about divine love when everyone is dying? How can you talk about pro humanitate when only a certain class of students are considered human? How can you talk about issuing a call to conversation when student activists have been trying to call you to the conversation for years after year after year? How can you talk about accountability when you still haven't adequately accounted for some incidents of blackface that happened back then and continue to happen now to this very day? How can you talk about a poverty task force in Winston-Salem when the majority of your staff and employees working at the pit, in the hallways, in the residence halls of this institution, after hours on a graveyard shift, aren't getting paid a livable wage, let alone are being treated like crap by the white students who attend this university, by the wealthy students who attend this university, by the privileged students who attend this university? How can you talk about diversity and inclusion when marginalized students, including myself, can't get through a semester? The students who live in the margins of the margins, they can't get through a semester without experiencing a panic attack, severe bouts of depression, racial bigotry from their classmates, misgendering by their professors and staff members and their classmates, ignorant comments about disability, inadequate responses to sexual assault and violence, shame for the inability to pay for textbooks that are so absurdly expensive. And there's not even a gender-neutral restroom across from the LGBTQ center at this university, for Christ's sakes. I realized that I was merely surviving at this institution for the first 3 years when I attended undergrad. I was tired of merely surviving at this institution. I was tired of gauging my worth off of my productivity and how well I could perform for the world each and every day, how well I could perform in the classroom each and every day, having to raise my hands when white students were so silent about racial bigotry at their institution each and every day, having to call out my administration semester after semester for some BS dialogues that they continue to hold and have, which have never worked and continues to perpetuate this classist respectability politics when we have conversations at this institution. I was tired of saying yes to things, not because I felt called to do them, but because no one else was doing the work, and because I needed to do them if I was going to survive at this institution. I protested because I needed to survive. I called out people because I needed to survive. I did the research that I did because I needed to survive. I became an RA because I wanted other people to survive. I'm in the position that I'm in now because I need to survive. And I was merely surviving. And when I got to my senior year of undergrad, at some point I was tired of surviving and I wanted to flourish instead. I wanted to dye my hair pink and finally speak my truth. I wanted to share my desire to flourish with the younger generation without having to hide my gender identity, to the point where kindergartners and first graders were correcting grown adults on my pronouns before grown adults can correct them on my pronouns. I wanted to have glowing skin and feel at home in my body for the first time, and I wanted to fall in love with someone who was willing to elevate my identity and not drain it, not be out here like these fuckboys in these streets who didn't care about me year after year after year after year, giving my emotional time to them year after year when they weren't going to give it to me. I wanted to live in my nuances and begin my own trauma healing. I wanted to feel what it meant to be more than just the sexual trauma I experienced. I wanted to feel like what it meant to be a woman who didn't have to be harassed every day. And I still get harassed every day because I am misgendered as a woman, but I wanted that relationship between my she and my they not to be confined to these really harsh and strict categories that don't fully contain my awesomeness, my dopeness. And I didn't want to mourn the loss of people who identified as me anymore. I wanted to do it with a community of people who are ready to flourish with me too. I wanted to do it with people who are like me, who are out here in the streets doing trauma healing, people out here pushing the agenda, people out here risking their lives, risking their mental health, risking their education, risking their scholarships, risking everything about themselves, risking their own self-worth, just so that administration could listen to them, just so that we didn't have to experience racism anymore, just so that we didn't have to experience sexism anymore, just so that we didn't have to experience heterosexuality anymore in the way that it's so toxic. And I want to flourish for my ancestors whose lives were cut short fighting to survive. I wanted to facilitate and begin the healing energy and momentum that they had started for me, but they couldn't quite achieve for themselves because they were too busy trying to survive, and they were stuck in that cycle of violence that eventually took their lives. And I wanted to flourish and survive for those who come after me, those first years, second years, third years, fourth years, seniors, grad students who are younger than me, who are older than me, professors, faculty, staff members who are at this institution, which acts as another plantation, trying to survive, trying to get their bread, trying to get their money, trying to pay for their kids' educations, trying to find some semblance of self-worth within themselves at an institution that tells them that they're worthless every day. I wanted to flourish so that those who come after me can flourish too, and so that they know that they have the freedom to flourish the way they want to flourish every day. I think it's so important that when we think about building dreams and building institutions that are, oh my God. Hang on, y'all, I'm sorry. I think it's so important that we're building institutions that can hold all of our truths authentically, spiritually, emotionally, physically, psychologically, can hold these truths authentically, holistically, so that we don't have to shut off parts of ourselves so that we can turn on something else for the master. For those individuals who look down on us, for our white counterparts who traverse this world every day without having to think about what it's like to traverse this institution and a brown or black body. For those Christian counterparts who believe in God, and yes, God can be beautiful. She can be whatever she wants to be, but they contain God to this container that insists that God is abusive, that insists that God is colonial, that insists that God is these very limited notions of what God actually is. For our straight counterparts who don't understand that fraternities and sororities don't quite fit some of the boxes that some of us like me might check off of when it comes to our gender identity. For our administration who tries so hard to have these community dialogues, and they try so hard to be diverse and inclusive, but they actually fund not quite diverse and inclusive practices or pedagogies or corporations. And they try to hide and shuffle things under a rug, but claim that their pamphlets are reflective of their institution. And I want to flourish. I don't want to have to die trying to be myself. And I don't want those behind me, those descendants who come behind me at this institution, I want them to realize that they can flourish as well. And that Wake doesn't give a fuck about you, but you can for yourself. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
Okay, so as like a person in the majority, how do you think it's the best way to support like your friends who are minority groups?
That's a question because there are a lot of majorities on this campus, not just white students, but a lot of people with different type of privileges. I have certain type of privileges that I have to work on, that other people also have to work on as well. But I think that not just majority, because there can be a privileged position or privileged group of people who aren't the majority, but those with privilege, I think that it's really important to let those marginalized voices come to the forefront. I think it's really important to believe their experiences. I think it's really important to give them the platform and not speak for them because they're perfectly capable of speaking for themselves the majority of the time. If I knew the answer, I probably wouldn't be here. But that's what I have so far, thus far. Yes. If I can change one thing about my undergrad experience, I wish that I dated different people because straight men don't give a crap about me. I wish that I had mentors, like more Black queer mentors for me. Because that's very much lacking. I wish I didn't have to find and be able to find the strength in myself to say no to certain things until I got to my senior year. When I was a senior, people like didn't see me on campus at all because I had finally decided that I wasn't gonna do Wake Forest stuff anymore, that I was gonna finally do things for myself and things and projects that I wanted to work on for myself, except for branches because I already committed that the year before. But I wish that people, especially marginalized voices who have no power, would just, I wish I had the strength to do things for myself and not for other people. And not just on like, not going with the flow and not following the majority, but more so like finding out what I wanted and what I needed for myself in order to thrive at the institution. And some students are finding it at younger and younger years of undergrad, and some students are still trying to find it as seniors and as grad students. Yes.
What groups or institutions do you find like more helpful on campus since you stick around with grad school, Divinity school?
The Divinity School was one of those institutions that I just started to find my senior year. They offered me free food, which I think is so important for undergraduates. I really appreciate free food, but they also are they have their own issues, right? But they also have a very different way of listening to students and actually engaging with students that the larger institution is at the moment. Other institutions, I think it's less so institutions and more so people. Because I really don't like institutions. I think people like them because they provide structure and people are afraid to like really be themselves. But it was really like key people who really propelled my survival throughout undergraduate career. So Nehemiah Roll, Shelley Sizemore, Kaylin Baxter, a lot of people who helped me through undergrad don't even attend or go to this institution or work at this institution anymore because they themselves knew that they had to leave for themselves. And like my fellow peers and colleagues. I think those were my greatest mentors more than any staff, faculty, administration member could ever be. Because when I did talk to staff and faculty, the majority of the time they thought I had it together because I was performing so well in school. They thought I had it together because I was doing all these things in school. Meanwhile, I'm like, I'm drowning, like I can't do anything and I can't move anywhere and I'm still stuck in this box. But my peers understood that experience. And so my peers were my greatest mentors and the greatest institutions that helped me get through undergrad. And now I'm in grad school at Wake Forest and part of me still doesn't know why, but I'm here and they gave me scholarship, so yep. Anyone else? I would stop posting it in Wake Chapel, and these other like kind of like neutral spaces that the administration have control over. I think that those dialogues are just like, they're just fodder, you know, they're just fodder to a conversation that has been going on for decades, and people have already put out demands like years ago for what can change about those dialogues. People have already put out demands like recently on how they can change those dialogues, and I think that the biggest things that need to change are the people who are at the tables. And like, I get that the provost and the president and advisors and like those people, the administration, are important, but they have jobs to maintain, and they have, you know, a certain persona they have to maintain as well. This university is for the students. It's not for the administration. And so I think that when we center students and finally like really center students in those dialogues, I think it would somewhat change. I would also fire some people, but I'm not going to name who. Anyone else? Yes.
I'm curious about what you think you might have learned from your time here that you wouldn't have learned other places. Like, do you think there's anything unique to the experience of Wake Forest that, I mean, not to say that it was a mecca or something, but, you know, like, does it have unique gifts to your time here that you're grateful for? Nah. Like, I could think about it, but like, I think that I would have turned out as dope as I am, like, regardless of what institution I went to. I do think that, like, I'm really cool with the person I am now because of Wake Forest in particular. I haven't traveled any other dimensions and figured out what I would have looked like if I went to other institutions. But I think Wake Forest is a microcosm of greater society. I think it's a great microcosm for greater society. So if you want a training ground for how to survive, Wake Forest is the training ground to do it at. But I think that, like, you know, again, like institutionally, Wake Forest would love to separate itself from other institutions. But once you start getting into that, like, you know, what makes Wake Forest unique, you start realizing that the institution itself is not unique, but the people who go to the institution are unique. And really, the students are what make or break a university. And the ways in which they're admitting students right now into university is not quite unique, because Wake Forest is still like 70% almost white. And then we could talk about the other percentages as well. But yeah, I don't think it's that unique. Anyone else? Yes.
As you're continuing, as you get, you know, as a graduate, what does the future hold for you, do you think?
The future holds for me, like, on a basic logistical level, I've started saying no to things now, which is really important for me, because I do have the tendency to spread myself really thin. I've started not caring about respectability politics because, as I saw, like, ironically yesterday on Facebook, respectability politics wouldn't save me anyway. I'm at the div school now, which has been an interesting experience. It's been spirit breaking for me in different ways than I thought it was going to be spirit breaking for me. But I'm really pleased and happy. I think Wake Divinity School is a unique place that you can't find anywhere else. Wake Forest as an institution, meh. Wake Divinity School, I would say that for myself, and I think that I'm really happy that I go there. Right now, it's just like trying to get through div school, trying to graduate from there. I'm working with Katina Parker, who's this awesome Black queer visionary filmmaker, on a documentary called A Love Supreme. and the documentary is about Black queer Christians within the South, and that dialogue between families and Black queer folk who come out to their families and their congregations. And I'm looking at, hopefully internship-wise and hopefully money-wise, that I get to create curriculum and resources for folks who engage with that documentary, so that they can find ways to flourish for themselves and not have to be trapped surviving in their congregations in the South, because the South is a very particular place. But after that, I mean, maybe PhD programs. Academia, like, while I say I hate institutions, it also provides a lot of structure for me. And so, unfortunately, I'm still trying to survive in some other ways. And, you know, applying to grad school after grad school is a good way to not being a real adult. So that's what is on my plate right now, but I'm figuring it out. I tend to make decisions last minute, which is how I went to Wake Forest undergrad, which is how I went to Wake Forest Divinity School, and I'm probably going to happen when I do my PhD program as well. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions for Jeni? And well, you can of course come and speak to it afterwards, but thank you so much. This was
Yeah.
great.